Francesca Woodman was a photographer who died quite young. She took her own life, sadly. She showed up at the Rhode Island School of Design, what we refer to as RISD, uh, and as an undergraduate blew everybody out of the water. The school hadn't seen an artist come through like her, and they weren't exactly prepared for it either. She made images outside of the norm of what people were doing. I mean, especially at a time when it was still a lot of, straight documentary photography, walking around in the world, photographing what you find. And Francesca Woodman was going out to these abandoned homes and creating these really kind of ghostly, dramatic, almost spiritual photographs using herself in all of her images. Um, Sometimes when you look at a situation like her and you realize that she ended up taking her own life, you can tell that what was going on inside of her was starting to come out through her artistic practice, but it was a little more complicated than that. She made a lot of photographs by the time she was in her mid-20s, and they're all really incredible. I'd take a moment to look at Francesca Woodman if you have the chance. Okay, I promise these aren't all just older photographers, but a lot of these are quite important. And of course, like Mitch Hedberg has mentioned in his jokes, all pictures are made from the past. This is a series by Lee Friedlander called Signs. I don't really need to talk that much about this, except I will say the way that a body of work like this comes about is you photograph and you photograph and you photograph and you photograph for years and years and years. In Lee Friedlander's case, about 70 years. This project was made just a couple of years ago. He went through and found all the photographs that he had made of signs throughout his entire career photographing and made a project out of them. That's one approach to making a body of work. You have the idea photography, which is where you say, I'm going to go and I'm going to photograph trees, apple trees, like I've been photographing apple trees. Or let's say you're going to photograph your cousin. You could start that way by saying, I'm going to go do this. Here's what I'm going to do. And then you do it. Or what you'll start to notice even through this class is at the end, once you have accumulated a lot of photographs, you'll go through and you'll start to find new threads, new connections between images, which all can start to be a part of a new series. So that's how this body of work was made. Justine Kurland is a photographer that I've only found out about recently. I got her book on this specific body of work. This book just came out about in the last year. This book is called Girl Pictures. And what Justine Kurland did was she befriended and followed around the groups of women, or girls actually in this case, because a lot of them are quite young. A lot of them are kind of, like a little bit fringe. You could call them runaways, but they're all just out living together, adapting, learning, struggling, surviving, really. And Justine Kurland has done quite a good job of just being present with them and photographing as they go through their journey in life. Erica Demon Born in England, but has been studying here in the States, actually in California, San Francisco. She's a lovely photographer, and you can find a lot of her work locally. This is actually just her second body of work. This is a series called Brown. She has another series that's called Silhouettes. I think it's called Silhouettes. And what Erica Demon has done is chosen a backdrop, the color of her own skin, and chose to photograph Black or African American men with their shirts off in front of her own skin tone. Quite a powerful series. So let's get into sequence now, which, if you've started to kind of notice, sequence has been happening this whole time. Sequence is the order. Sequence is what I've talked to you about. Make sure you have intention with how you present your images. All you have when you're sending your pictures out into the world is how you've decided to present them. As soon as somebody else looks at your images, it's up to you to control their order, right? So there's Edward Muybridge again, just to reiterate exactly how important the images need to be in an order for this specific type of work. Dwayne Michaels is a really, really lovely example for the work needing to follow its specific order because it's a story. So Dwayne Michaels, still alive. He's a bit older now. A really lovely bodies of work. I know he inspired Francesca Woodman when she was making work. But what Dwayne Michaels did was, again, at the time, not very popular. It was a little too out there, and people were concerned with his illustrative use of the medium of photography. And it also was hard, he was a gay man in the, 60s making this work, 70s making this work. So not only was he making work that was different, he was already outcasted. But he would give them titles. This one, in this case, The Spirit Leaves the Body. And as you can see, these are all done through a series of multiple exposures that allowed the figure to become ghostly-like and move through the images. Death Comes to the Old Lady. It's simpler, but it's a story, and there's an order to it. This image I'm going to leave up for a little bit because it can take a minute to register exactly what's happening. But if you start at the top left and move to the right all the way till the end, you can see exactly what it is that's happening. So Dwayne was kind of cerebral. It wasn't just, oh, watch the movement of the person walking. It was, look at how this scene is a scene within itself. It was much deeper. All right. Chance meeting, super simple. Two people walking, one person looks back, that person's out of frame, the next frame, the other person's looking back. It's so subtle, and the title helps. The title helps with all of these. Words really, really do impact the work that we're looking at. Amy Lavera, a person I just found out about and thought this would be fun to share with the class. This is kind of in the vein of Dwayne Michaels' storytelling. And I can't can't remember the name of this project. Something about bird detective, something like that. But if you can't read it, it says at last we meet, and it's what looks like a cutout bird with a suitcase, and the person opening the door for the bird. So this work has drawings and photographs, and I pulled this directly from her website in order with the illustrations because they're intentional and they're important to her story. And there's a really good chance, I'm not sure because I don't really know much about this artist, but there's a good chance that this entire body of work started with illustrating and drawing them out beforehand. Here the bird has a teacup, drinking tea together. She's bringing the bird around with her. These really look like self-portraits too, and it's an interesting angle. It's kind of a lower angle looking up. Writing a letter together. A lot of letters. There's sort of a fantasy to these. So there's there's these little tidbits of information to help to kind of, they're clues, right? They're clues to clue you in as to what's going on in the story. Birds pointing, and that's the last one from these images. That's Amy Lavera. Amy Lavera. Nicholas Nixon. I think this is the last one I'm showing, and the reason I'm sharing this is because it's very much based in sequence and series, and the part about this project is it's a very slow project, and it took him over 40 years. This is the first picture. And what Nicholas Nixon did was photograph his wife and her 3 sisters once a year for over 40 years. I'm only going to share a few of them. I'm not going to share all 40. But it's this incredible process that any of us can do if we wanted. There's Nicholas Nixon's shadow in the picture. But what he's done is create this sort of body of work that's like each one of these images is just a small frozen fraction of a second from time, and together all of the images create this long story of humans and change, how they change, how we all change. It's one of those projects that really needs that long term attention, doing this, you could do this 5 years in a row, but when you do it for something like 40, it's quite a different, it's gonna feel different because you're really gonna see the change. And that's the last of Nicholas Nixon, and it's also the last of the slideshow.